Hello, everyone. Welcome to the channel. Today we have a very, very special guest. In the saxophone world, we're always talking about reeds, and it's something that we need to take care of since we're starting on the horn. And there's so many myths and so many things that we do wrong. And today we have Jack Tyler from Boston Sax. It's an amazing company, which I'm proud to be an ambassador of for the past 5, 6 maybe years. I've been
Yeah.
playing Boston Sax reeds. They've been amazing. They've actually become a very important part, actually an essential part of my gear and my music. I've carried those over. I've played them on pretty much all my social media posts for the past 6 years and albums and everything. So they've been a really great part of my journey. And Boston Sax, an amazing company. They also make necks and just phenomenal, top-notch sax gear. And Jack is an amazing, also like luthier, saxophone maintenance. They do a lot of amazing things with Boston Sax. So here we have Jack here. How are you doing? Thank you for your
Wow.
time.
Man, that's quite the introduction. Well, first off, thank you for being a part of the brand and supporting us. And you were one of the first people to start using the products when we were just kind of in the infancy of beginning the brand. So thank you for, giving us a chance and all that you do for the saxophone community. And it's a privilege to have you as a part of the team here. But yeah, thanks for having me on here and happy to talk about some gear.
Amazing. No, thank you so much, Jack. It's been great to actually be part of the company from early stages, and I'm honored and proud, and look forward to keep collaborating with you guys because it's truly I believe a lot in the company, and
Right on.
I actually haven't physically been there yet, so that's still
I
pending.
know you gotta come visit. You
Yeah,
gotta come visit.
yeah. Okay, fantastic. So I thought we start. Let's just talk a little bit about the origin. Like, how did Boston Sax Shop start? What inspired you to create your own reeds? I know you were mainly uh, focusing on repairing, right? Before that, what is the story behind
Yeah.
it?
Well, I went to school for saxophone performance. I really never intended to start a business or learn how to do repairs or, I guess at the very least make that the mainstay of my livelihood. But as I was wrapping up my master's degree here in Boston, I went to New England Conservatory. The opportunity just kind of fell in my lap because I was apprenticing with someone in repair work because I was interested in it, but I wanted to, kind of use that to pay the bills so I could be playing gigs. Um, and that mentor ended up very tragically passing away. So there was kind of, for lack of a less cheesy way to put it, I kind of had a calling, like to kind of take up his mantle and continue the work that he was doing because he was an incredible technician. And so I started the shop, and it was just me fixing horns for many years. But I was still playing. And if you've met me, you know that I'm a giant nerd really about anything, especially vintage saxophone stuff, and was always looking for, products that were, super high quality, and a lot of those were difficult to find. So I would have people come in and I'd be working on their horn and they'd ask me, "Oh, what reeds do you use?" And I say, "Oh, you know what? I use Rigati." And they'd be like, "Oh, what's Rigati? I've never heard of that." Because really, if you think about it, 10 years ago, there weren't a lot of people playing Rigati reeds. There was just a couple, right? Like, I mean, they were out there for sure, but it wasn't as much of a mainstay in the saxophone community. And I was, importing products from Japan for myself and like showing them to my friends. And, because I didn't go to school for business, it took me like 4 years to figure out, hey, instead of just recommending all of these things, why don't I just have them here and, like actually sell them? That would be nice. So I started selling some different products, not my own. And again, I just have a mind that almost anything that I buy, there's always like it's almost perfect, but I would have done it just a little bit differently. And one of those things for me was the reeds. Like I had fallen in love with the consistency and the quality of Rigati reeds because they just for me were head and shoulders above the other big brands. And I'm not one that really likes, I don't like to mess with reeds. I don't like to work on reeds. I just want them to do their job so I can focus on playing. And they were making that happen for me. But the only very personal issue that I had was that they were just too bright. That was the short
Oh,
version. And
really?
I was
Oh,
playing. Yeah, so like the regular Brigatti Gold for me personally, we're just a little bit on the brighter side. And I've always been very sensitive to especially the upper register, especially on Selmer saxophones. It tends to kind of close down on you. And a reed that doesn't have that, cooperative resistance in the upper register, like it would just get kind of thin, for lack of a better word.
yeah.
And I know that that's a me thing, but I eventually went to Rigatti. I think it was at the NAMM show actually,
Mhm.
and just kind of begged them. I mean, literally, I was like, "Look, I've got this little tiny one-man shop in Boston. I love your reeds. I sell your reeds. Would you ever consider like making a darker jazz cut?" And they, for some reason, took a liking to me, and they said, "Yeah, we'll prototype something for you." And we went back and forth for about 3 or 4 months. Just basically me playing different versions of the read. I didn't like go to a computer and type out and like create a 3D model or anything. I was just like, what happens if we make this part thicker? Like I'm an idiot. I don't know anything about this stuff. I don't know how to, like I've learned all of it through just playing things. I'd be like, what if we make this much thicker and make this thinner? What does that do? And so, I drove them crazy again for about 6 months. And finally, I got something that really worked well for me. And then I invited some of my friends over in the community in Boston. I was like, check this out. Does this suck? I'm like, I'm the only one that's going to like this.
Yeah.
And they were all like, whoa, no, no, this is great. We love this. And I was like, would you pay money for this? And they're like, yeah. And I honestly just thought everybody was placating me. So I ordered my first batch of Boston Sax Shop reeds, which were the black label. But at the time, I didn't have packaging. Like I couldn't afford to make packaging. So literally, the reeds came to me just in the sleeve, and I would put them in a paper bag and sell them to people. I'd like walk down to the post office one at a time and sell a bag of 5 reeds that I would put together. And I eventually got the website set up so people could actually buy these because before you'd have to either like come to the shop or like mail me a check. And then it just, kind of grew from there.
Yeah, nice. Wow, that's such a story. So there's like your customized reads that ended up basically.
Yeah, it was really just for me. And yeah, people just liked him way more than I thought.
Yeah, yeah, that's so great. I mean, they have such an amazing control, which is something the first thing I noticed is that everything sounds round. Usually when
Oh,
I played like the Rico Jazz Select were what I played before mainly,
sure.
and they're great reads as well. But the consistency on the roundness, it's what I really liked about the Boston Sax, which combined
Oh,
with my side of
thanks, man.
it's really really great. So can you
Yeah.
walk us through the reed making process from from cane to finished product, like just so people know how really this is built.
Yeah, sure. Well, without getting too boring about it,
No, of course
I
not.
I guess it's very easy for us to forget that this is an agricultural product. And in reality, it's kind of amazing that we can get any consistency at all because so much of the way that the reed performs is just because of the organic nature of the cane. I mean, really, the only thing that we can control is how long it's dried for, when the actual harvest is done, and then the cut of the reed. Like a lot of people don't know, and I didn't know that, like a 2.5 and a 4, they're the same thickness, right? When a reed is cut, they have a blank, right?
Mhm.
And they're all cut exactly the same. Like it's one design, right? So like the Black Label reeds, when they make 1,000 tenor reeds for us, they're gonna cut them all the same, and then they go back and measure how much the tip flexes, and that's what determines the strength.
Oh,
So
really?
it's really,
Wow.
yeah. So it's Mother Nature that
I didn't
determines
know
the
that.
strength.
I didn't
Yeah,
know that.
right. Most people don't
Yeah.
don't know that.
So the strength happens, kind of thing, right? If it
Yes, the strength is completely determined by the structure of the cane, the elasticity, the amount of resiliency right here at the tip. Literally, it's a machine. They put the reed on, and the machine presses up, and the amount of pressure that it's pressing with is predetermined, and that's consistent. And the amount of flex the reed has, that's what makes it a four or a one.
Wow,
But the
I had no idea
cut and
about
the
that.
thickness is the same. Yeah. So, I think that that's pretty fascinating, but really, again, how the reeds actually get made, besides that actual process, is again, it's just, the control of how you're where you're adding the thickness, like what the taper is, and that's what a reed design is.
Yeah.
But again, for me, now that I've done this, I guess 5 times with 5 different types of reeds, I've learned where adding or reducing material will, at least in my opinion, change how the reed will perform. But again,
Mhm.
so much of it is just the agricultural product, which is again why I think Rigati is so great, because they've figured out how to do that on the ground level, you know?
Yeah. Wow, that's fantastic. Like I just learned something huge. I thought it was a whole thing that it was very meticulous with the
Yeah.
slices, and I didn't know it was like literally the natural state. And which
Yeah.
makes sense because some reeds from the same size are a little different too. Which
Yeah, exactly. It's like anything. It's like wine, right? Like some seasons are gonna be different. The amount of humidity, the, conditions of the soil, how much it rains,
yeah,
That's why, um, I'm sure that Rigati, if it's a very wet season, they're gonna dry that cane. They're gonna add on months of drying to try and balance that out. And that's the stuff that I'm only sort of surmising based on my conversations with them, but they're the masters of that, that they're able to get, batch after batch to essentially play the same, even though there's all these crazy elemental conditions that they can't control.
absolutely. Wow, that's fantastic. Now let's get quickly into the how about what are the biggest factors that affect read consistency, you think? Because that's something that I'll say I want to learn. Like, we've a lot of people try so many things for to get their reeds going, with wetting them and putting them
Oh, sure.
on vodka oil and how about
Yeah.
the actual consistency? What are the biggest factors for that?
Yeah. Well, I think the way to get your reads playing more consistently is just to have a consistent method. Like, do the same thing. It's like I know lots of players that might, sometimes they're rotating reeds. Sometimes they get lazy and they're only going to play one reed until it dies. Sometimes they're soaking them. Like, find a method that gets you a pretty good result, and then you just got to stick with it. Like, the more variables you can eliminate from, the read process,
Yeah.
the better luck you're going to have. And, I have my method. Um, I made a video about it, if you're interested, because people ask all the time. But it might not work for everybody. I mean, I try to keep it as simple as possible. I really don't, again, like messing with my reeds any more than I have to. So it's pretty simple. I soak the reed on both sides for a couple minutes. If it's really humid, less time. If it's cool,
Mhm.
and dry, like in the winter, more time. Play them for a couple minutes. One thing to always be paying attention to is, like, if you play a reed for too long, right, it starts to become kind of see-through. You know what I mean? Like
Yes, yes, yes.
towards the tip. Like, that means you've probably gone too far. So stop. And then, you don't have to use a Boston Sax Shop reed case, but I like our reed case, because it's got a piece of glass on it, so that when you're storing it, it's storing on something flat,
Flat,
right?
flat,
Like,
yes.
yeah, don't put it back in here. Don't leave it on the mouthpiece. That's just going to shorten the life of the reed. Because basically, anytime the tip warps, you've already lost, days of that reed performing, right? Because if you think about the most delicate part of the reed is the tip, it's the thinnest part.
Yeah,
And what kills a reed, what makes a reed die, is, just that flexing back and forth and back and forth. And it's like a paper clip, right? When you
yeah,
keep doing that, it's eventually going to break. So you're breaking down the fibers, and that's why a reed goes dead. So the longer that you can keep the reed hydrated without being overly hydrated
yeah.
and not warped at the tip, it's going to last longer. And then the last thing, which is not a necessary thing, but I do think it helps, is, if you're playing a mouthpiece, most saxophone mouthpieces, on the table of the mouthpiece, they have a dip right here, which is just based on how mouthpieces are machined. When a lathe cuts the facing curve, the cutting tool heats up the material, and it ends up putting a little bit of a dip there.
Mhm.
Now, our mouthpieces, we take that out. It's a big pain in the ass, but we go for a completely flat table. But most companies won't do that because, as I said, it's a big pain in the ass. So as a result,
Of course, yeah.
when you're pressing the reed down on the table, if there's a dip in the table, you're going to get a bump on the back of the reed, which means that if you don't line that reed up in the exact same place the next day, it's probably going to be leaking a little bit. So
Oh yeah.
that's when it's a good idea every couple days or something that you just take a, it doesn't have to be this, it could be a reed geek, but this is on our multi-tool and just level out the back of the reed a
Out
little
a
bit.
little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And that'll just help it seal better. That's really it. So that's the short version.
That's great. And I should be doing a lot of these things. Sometimes I'm just lazy with the reads, but
No,
honestly,
I get it.
I
I mean, again, it's
yeah,
like it's a
I,
pain.
I'm guilty with dipping them in water and then they become overly
Yeah.
humid, and then when you store them and then they wrap, and then
Mhm.
and something I have noticed, like in LA here, the weather is dry all the time, so they wrap all, like it's hard
Yeah.
to keep them. And I've noticed also when I travel to more humid places, I instantly am able to play a half a number stronger in reeds.
Right.
Like a
Yeah.
three or
Mhm.
a two and a half, which is why I like to have the I guess would they naturally get more humidity and they can play kind of better. But it's a good point that you can't also like over humidify them, I guess, or
Yes.
like
Yeah.
too much.
Well, interestingly enough, the other method that I think works really well, it's actually even easier, but it's you have to get used to it. Like a couple friends of mine just keep their reeds soaked all the time.
I
Just
know.
literally
Yeah, right.
all the time. I can't do it because to me, things just get kind of stuffy and resistant in a way that I don't like. But if you try that and it works, then do that because that eliminates so many variables. Because if they're literally just soaked all the time, you don't have to really worry about warping. You don't have to worry about managing humidity. So yeah, that's another method that you
I've
could
seen
try.
it. I've seen it. I thought it would like mess up with the reed eventually, just kind of removing, I don't know, parts of the reed. Because when I dip it for too long, I see like the water gets like
Oh, really?
you know.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a thing that you can do. I don't think the reads will last as long,
Yeah,
but again, it puts them in it's such a hydrated state that they actually become stable because they can't get any more hydrated.
yeah.
And if you're storing them literally like my one of my guys who works at the shop does this, and he just has like a medicine bottle, right? And it's just filled with water.
Put it on.
You could use vodka, you could use Listerine to reduce like the bacterial element. But yeah, that's another thing you can try.
Okay, cool, great. Well, that's great. That's great to know. That's great to know.
Mhm.
I'm gonna try some a batch and do that. That's
There you
great.
go.
Yeah, especially on dry weathers. And okay, so why don't can you tell us a little bit about the new reeds? Because you have some new models that are coming out. I'm excited to try them out. I'll be
Oh
making
yeah.
another video about testing them. I've mainly
Oh cool.
tested the black one, but
Mhm.
like just talking about specifically that, how is that process behind making the what is it now, the black box, the red box, the silver box? What are the differences that are happening? I remember when I
Yeah.
played Rico Jazz Select, there was a big difference between the French cut and the American cut, of
Mhm.
how that affected like the thickness or brightness, or how does that work out?
Yeah. Well, much like my long-winded story about making the black label reads to start, again, it really has just come down to me just playing, the reads. I would like to think, a much better idea of, as I was mentioning, the variables that really make the biggest difference in how Reed is going to play.
Mhm.
And so I've just kind of applied that knowledge to, continue to kind of flesh out our offerings because for some people, the black label reads are a little bit too dark.
Yeah, very.
And I wanted to find something that would work for them. So for the silver label, which was the second cut that I did and my absolute favorite box, even though it's
Oh,
really hard to, yeah, because it's shiny. So for these, what we did is we kept the same tip thickness that's on the black label, which I think is why these reeds perform the way they do because they have a thicker tip. They last a really long time because, like we were talking about, if the tip is thicker, it's going to be more durable. It's literally going to last
Yeah,
longer.
true.
And
Yeah.
I think that that's what gives them that sort of homogeny across the registers, that good resistance that you
Yeah.
need to keep things even. So for the silver label, I was like, how can we make these brighter but not lose what makes them cool? So we kept the tip the same and we just reduce some of the material here at the heart of the reed. And that kind of, livened them up a little bit without losing the longevity.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Great.
yeah, that was the silver. And then after that, we had people reaching out saying, hey, I love Boston Sax Shop reeds. I use them for all of my jazz gigs. I use them in jazz band, but I can't use them for concert band or I can't use them for classical music. I would love to be buying them from you instead of Van Doren. So for the blue label, that was our classical cut, but I also know like a lot of great jazz players that use classical style reeds, and I used to do that. I used to play Rico Reserves, I used to play the 12s. And so yeah, we kind of went the opposite direction in the design because I started measuring those reeds and they're very, very different than a jazz cut.
Yeah.
So like, the most famous classical reed of all time, the Van Doren Blue Box, has a very thin tip, which gives it a very quick, accurate art.
Yes.
Yeah, the articulation is quicker. And then they have a thicker heart profile. And that was basically what we did. We took, the black label reeds and thinned the tip and thickened up the heart, and that's how these happened. And then the new ones, the red ones, were for the people that were like, hey, you know what? Thanks for making these. Still not bright enough. I need more.
Yeah.
I
Just yes.
really, really want to be able to cut through, almost like a Java kind of
Yeah.
read. And so, yeah, we went this direction, which is basically thin tip, so very, very, very fast articulation, and then more of a medium heart profile. So, like, basically as thin as we could go without them
Wow.
sounding, too edgy and still having, body. So yeah, I mean that's really it. But again, these are like the conversations I would have with brigadiers, like exactly how I'm describing it. I'm not saying, okay, we're gonna go zero point 0.5 thousandths of an inch at this
Yeah.
station point on the reed. It's like, can you make this thicker, make this thinner, send me 10 of those and I'll try them and I'll get back to you. Like that's how I've made everything, you know?
Fantastic. Fantastic. Yeah. I'm excited to try the red box. It's crazy.
Yeah, I
Used
think you'll like him.
I used to play the Van Doren Blue Box for a while, and also it's interesting when you have a bright mouthpiece, you can actually might be able to combine it with a more classical reed, and maybe
Mhm.
it's like a match made in heaven. You don't want to probably use a bright reed and a bright mouthpiece, but it's kind of crazy. I talk a lot about the actual internal embouchure we'll have, how some people sound bright on a dark setup and some people
Yeah.
sound dark on a bright setup just because we have our own setup, I guess, that
Yeah, man.
also influences the reads, and
That's
everything.
a very, very good point. And whenever I'm talking to people about mouthpieces and reeds, it's so important to have a good understanding of what you're talking about, which is your natural tongue position. Some people play with a high tongue position and that's what's comfortable. I have that, right? So for me to get the sound I want, which is very dark, I've got to play a mouthpiece with no baffle. I've got to play hard reeds,
Yeah,
because naturally I have a lot of baffle going on in here. So yeah, I mean
exactly,
that's
exactly. That
that's
yeah,
mm,
yeah. In my case, I always say that I have like the my jaw is like pushed back,
oh, okay.
so
Yeah.
a lot, which I think is the reason why I'm more comfortable with bigger tip openings, just because if I play like anything below an 8, I just
Yeah.
can't. I just feel like
Oh
very,
wow.
very uncomfortable, And
Yeah,
I,
no,
I guess I guess the bigger tip opening compensates for my own, embouchure to
no,
so
it makes perfect sense. And it's really, really easy to forget that, the gear will influence your tone to a certain degree, but more than anything else, it's your
Oh yeah.
physical makeup, and it's important to remember that because otherwise you spend way too much money on mouthpieces.
Yeah, I have some videos where I'm talking. I always go back to the first thing for me, which is airflow and air support. From once
Mhm.
you have that covered, then you can start, understanding this. Because if you don't have air support, then all of this just makes no sense,
Yeah,
the,
for
the
sure, man.
setup.
Yep.
Okay, let me ask you, what's the one mistake advanced players or just players in general? What's the one mistake players still make when it comes to reeds? What's the main thing that you think like a myth or something that just people are doing and it's just not, correct?
Yeah, with reads, I mean, honestly, yeah, I mean, well, you kind of proved my point, unfortunately, which is just yeah, like storage and maintenance of the reads. I mean, a lot of pros, and I get it. Like you guys are busy. I mean, especially you're doing, performances, you're doing recordings, you're doing social media, like a lot of content creation. Like you don't have time to sit there and like carefully plan out how many reads you're going to rotate and make sure you're soaking them the same every day. Like, but it really does make a big difference. But yeah, like I mean, Joe Lovano, he just leaves the reed on his mouthpiece until literally it won't play anymore. And like
I've,
that's
I,
fine.
I have to admit I've done that at some point when I'm
Yeah,
recording the full day and at different times, and
sure.
I just put the cap. I didn't know he does it. Like it's crazy.
Yeah, no, no. Literally, I think he's done that his entire life. And that's fine. That's fine if it works for you. But yeah, I would say that the more you can because in reality, the reed is the most important part of the setup. The reed will affect the entire instrument more than any other single component other than yourself.
Yeah.
So putting in that little extra time is going to serve you well.
Oh, it is worth it. It can even make a saxophone that is really misaligned still sound good. And I've noticed that like the first time I bought my Content M that it was really bad, but
Oh yeah.
over the place because I just got it on eBay before I
Right.
placed it. You really tried a few reeds, and I was able to make the subtone, at some point,
Hmm.
because the reed
Sure.
was, I had the perfect reed, so even it was able to even push through the leaks, what I mean? Which I
Yeah.
not that you should not have a saxophone with leaks, but just the point is that the reed definitely the concept of the smallest element can have the biggest impact sometimes.
Hmm.
I feel like with
Yeah.
life, a lot of other things happen that way. Okay, yeah, let's finish off. Like, can you mention a little bit about some of the other products, like the neck? I love the neck. Um,
Oh, thanks, man.
since I just switched to my Content M, unfortunately, it doesn't fit the con because
Yeah.
I have the neck turned around. But
I
I
do.
I love the heritage neck.
I did make this about a year ago, and I'm not sure if I can put it into production, but I made a heritage neck for cons. So
Really?
maybe I have
Oh,
a
that's
prototype.
for like
Maybe we can talk about
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. Because I have this the
Yeah. Oh, you've got the underslung octave teeth.
under yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay. That might make
I
it a little
think it's
tricky.
weird because before they made it so that it's the opposite, I guess, with the double thing
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, this is like the style of the older 10Ms. But at any rate, yeah, the neck is I think people are now more aware of how important the neck is because of like folks like Kim Bach, who's been doing the custom necks for a while, and I'd like to think we've definitely put a lot of necks out into the world. But yeah, it's again at the very top of the instrument, so anything that's happening above the first tone hole will affect everything below it, like everything.
Well, that's a good point. That's a very good point.
Yeah, because like there's definitely people that'll be like, oh, it doesn't make any difference. And like, yeah, it definitely does, right? Because when you change the neck, you're changing essentially the bore of the entire instrument as a whole, right? Because the saxophone is a giant cone. If you made it straight, it would just be a big cone. And if you change the top of that to be wider or, a more acute or obtuse angle, it will definitely change how your air moves through the instrument.
100%.
So, for me, like we were talking about very early on, I used to play a Mark 6 and then eventually played a super balanced action. And those instruments are great. But when you compare them to something like a Con 10M or an earlier Selmer like a balanced action,
Mhm.
or a Selmer super sax like a radio improved or a cigar cutter, the difference in terms of just the width that you can get out of those horns is like, it's a completely different ball game. And my problem with Mark Sixes, and my problem even with a lot of SBAs, is they do get kind of compact, especially in the upper
I
register
agree.
and
Yeah.
also especially in the middle of the horn. Like the right hand D with the octave key on a Mark Six, unless you've got the key heights cranked open, is usually very stuffy.
Really?
But if
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I
I
saw
mean, and
that with the Selmer's Marxist. It's a totally different sound than Con to me, you know?
yeah, totally, totally. Yeah, but once you get used to a 10M or a balanced action or something like that, you get all that flexibility and your air just moves so much faster because there's literally more volume. It's hard to go back. But as you know, with your con, there are some downsides, right? Like the ergonomics, the intonation is a little bit trickier. So, what I started to realize because not to name drop, but Gerry Bergonzi had come in, and Gerry has a lot of saxophones. He's got a lot of older Selmers, pre-super balanced action horns. And, I forgot how this even happened. He's like, man, what happens if we like, let's put that neck on this horn and see what it does? And I was like, okay. So we took a radio improved neck and put it on a Mark Six, and it was like, holy shit. Like the Mark Six now feels like a radio improved, but I've got all the ergonomics and I've got,
Right.
better intonation. And it was just like, that was the first time for me, again, just simply through experimenting and playing, where I realized how big the neck of a factor it would be. And so the thing that I realized after I started measuring these necks, like the balance action necks and the radio improved necks, which are very similar, is that one of the things that was consistent is that the overall angle of the neck is higher.
Right.
And if you think about it, like if you look at a Mark Six, which I don't have one, a Mark Six neck, like this same neck for a tenor would be like the cork would be here, right? Compared to our neck, the Heritage neck. It's much
Yeah.
lower in terms of the angle. And also, sorry, I'm making this very long, but
Oh, that's
Levano,
great to know. Which it does change the sound a lot. It like
yeah,
can make it more focused sometimes, or more, or
mhm,
less free blowing, right?
yeah, for sure. So the other thing that influenced the design of our neck was Joe Lovano has a lot of his necks bent up. Like most of his necks, they've been bent up, and it actually makes a lot of sense. It's very simple. His theory is that if you're taking something that's bent and making it straighter, your air is going to move through it
Yeah,
faster,
makes
right?
sense. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Like take your garden hose and put a kink in it. What happens to the water? Make it straight.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of where we started with this was like, how can we get more flexibility, essentially reduce overall resistance, but not lose intonation? And so that's the short version of the Heritage Neck design.
That's fantastic, man. That's fantastic. Yeah, thanks so much for all the because I
Mhm.
didn't know. I did know about the next because I used the first saxophone I had, not the first one, but the second one started with Yamahas. I had a custom Z, but I was too bright for me. I wanted a dark tone, and
Uh-huh.
I couldn't get another sax at that time. I just bought. I think I bought a reference 56 neck
Oh, okay.
and put it.
Yeah.
I did a hybrid, and it actually really changed the sound.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
darkened it a lot, because the Yamahas can be very bright. So
Sure.
that was the first time I was like, yeah, wow, this really makes, it was
Yeah, there's
really
the
great.
thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because then also you can keep everything else the same. So trying out next is great. I hope, I can get, it would be amazing to try one with my, it's just,
Yeah. Yeah. We'd have
I
to
don't think
figure out something with the octave key, but
it's even possible to like change I don't know, the ergonomics or something so that the octave key can actually be on the other side. But these are like I think it was a specific con models in the 60s that they started making them like this, right?
mhm. Yeah. Yeah. For sure, man.
Awesome. Well, let's to finish off. Just how about two things?
Sure.
What's the biggest reed myth you wish would disappear? And then if you want to finish off with any piece of advice you'd give to every student, musician, saxophone player here in the community, just anything. It doesn't even have to be necessarily about gear, but about everything.
Okay. Yeah, so biggest reed myth, like myth about
Yeah,
reeds.
what is it like the biggest myth, or the biggest?
Hmm.
I know we've talked about the misconceptions, but especially for
Yeah,
some of them, maybe there's some people that are gonna be listening to this might be more in the beginning or the
sure.
intermediate side of things. Maybe they're not professional players, and maybe there's something that I know a lot of things we've talked about anyway here, but to
Yeah.
help them, cut through that because getting a good read set up and good maintenance, it really can help you, especially when you're a beginner and you
Yeah.
don't know where you're at.
Yeah, 100%. I would say that the myth that you need to be going up in read strength all the time is I think that's an important one maybe to mention because I think that a lot of students, in particular, myself included, like just thought that, the better you got, you should be playing harder reeds. And like all professional musicians play
Yeah.
super hard reeds. And yeah, there's definitely some that do. But number one, that's just silly. Number two, kind of like what you were talking about with, using a more classical reed on a mouthpiece that maybe is a little bit brighter. The majority of the highest level of saxophone players that I get to work with, there is always a balance. So even if they're playing a very hard reed, they're often not playing a huge tip opening mouthpiece, right? Like they're usually like think about Train, right? He played hard reeds, but he's playing a 6 star.
Yeah.
And if you look at all of, so sorry, I'm diverting a little bit, but I guess what I'm saying is that, you know, if you want to keep going up in reed strengths, you're probably gonna have to balance it out somewhere else because it's very, very rare to find a saxophone player that plays a very resistant setup across their entire equipment, right? Like a super open mouthpiece with no baffle, a really hard reed. The only person I can think of is like
Oh,
Garzone.
right. Yeah, I was gonna
And
say.
he's just a freak of nature.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
like, there's like Wendell plays twos and two and a halves with an 8 star. And like his sound is not super crazy bright. He's got a ton of control. So yeah, you don't need to keep going up.
Glad you brought that up because I was on that vibe, getting I had my 8 star, and then even when I I had George Garcon as a teacher, and then he got me
Oh, okay.
star,
Yeah.
and then he was like, which helped a lot to like get more resistance to get a better sound. But I at some point I was even trying to reach number 5, and I was like, I
Mm,
don't think it was even healthy at that point what I was doing.
no.
Just because I
Yeah.
thought I needed the harder setup to get that. But now I went down. I used reach number 2. I do use
Nice.
like 9 star, but softer reeds. And I know people like Michael Brecker ended up using very soft reeds at some point too,
Uh-huh.
getting this. So they just allow a lot better control sometimes, which is what I like with the Boston Sax is I can use a low number and
Oh, right on.
still get like muscle. Sometimes
Yeah.
with other reeds, I felt that if I go too low, I just kind of fall apart all over the place.
Yeah, it gets too thin. Yeah, right on. Yeah, I actually have done the same thing over the last couple of years where it's like, oh, I can play two and a halves and like I sound fine and it's just easier.
It really is. I'm glad you brought that up because that's
Yeah,
something I
for
want
sure.
to talk about. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else you want to finish off, like any tips or advice you'd like to give to everyone?
Yeah, well, thank you. I guess the only other thing that I could mention is like definitely get your horns checked out more than you probably are, right? Like that's another thing. Like most of the pros, they get their horn looked at way too little, and it's incredible. Like some of the saxophones that I've seen from, if you name famous saxophone player, we've probably seen it, and it's like nobody on the planet could play this. It's just falling apart. So that's one thing. And the other thing is like, when you're starting out, it's saxophone is unfortunate because it's kind of prohibitive cost-wise compared to a lot of other instruments, right? Like you can get a really nice trumpet for, the cost of like a student alto saxophone.
Yeah,
Um,
true.
but I will say that as you are starting, the gear actually matters more, right? Like the reed, the mouthpiece, the saxophone are going to have way more of an effect on your sound because you haven't developed all this, yet. Like you haven't developed your voicings, you haven't developed your air support, like you were mentioning. So, and this is not an advertisement for Boston Sax Shop. It's just that when you're starting, buy good stuff, like buy
Yeah.
quality products. Like what makes me so upset is I see some of these reed companies, they sell like student reeds, which are like crappy versions of their normal reeds. I'm like, this is a
Why?
horrible disservice. Like the student is not at a level yet where they're even probably able to determine if it's a good reed or not. And so they're struggling and they don't know why. And it's because it's a crappy reed or it's a crappy mouthpiece. So it's always a good idea to invest in good quality gear. Make sure that it's brands that have resale value because the biggest concern would be, I want to start playing saxophone. I don't want to spend a lot of money because I'm afraid I'm going to quit. Well, I say spend the money, buy the good stuff, and then if you quit, you can sell it. When you buy crappy stuff, you can't sell it. It's not worth anything. So
100%.
at least give yourself a jumping off point where you've got the best chance of success because you know that your equipment is right,
Yeah.
and then go from there, you know.
I'm glad you brought that up, man, because I think I mentioned that on a video or on a studio. I can't remember where I mentioned it, but I was saying
Mhm.
like the setup actually has a bigger impact when you're a beginner
Yeah,
because you don't have control. And when I have control, I can sort of try to sound like me on any other setup.
on
You
anything.
know,
Yes.
you have techniques so you can drop the jaw a bit more to compensate whatever, you know.
Yeah,
But if you don't, like I remember the first time I was using the first mouthpiece I bought because I had that Yamaha 4C or whatever it came with
sure.
that. Or,
Hmm.
and then I bought an Autolink 8 star for like
The big change. Yeah.
drastic change. But it was like, whoa, man.
Yeah.
So it allowed me to, it is important definitely to get, but also not get obsessed with the constant gear changing and changing. I know some saxophone players,
Yeah.
they avoid working on their sound and they change mouthpiece every 2 weeks. It's like
Yeah.
get
No.
something that you kind of like work on it. Then if you mutate, you can keep trying out. But I feel it's important to just stay in an area for a little bit, right?
Yeah, you have to because yeah, you're developing all of the internal, voicings around that mouthpiece or that reed. And if you constantly change it, you're delaying your progress much, much, much more for sure. So
100%,
yeah,
100%.
cool. Nice.
Awesome, man. Jack, thank you so much. This has
My
been
pleasure.
great, and I'm gonna leave some links below so that
Cool.
you can check out Boston Sax. Amazing products, amazing reeds, amazing necks.
Wow.
And
Thank you.
stay tuned. I'm gonna be doing a video trying out some of the different Boston Sax reeds, so
Yeah, yeah,
you
try
guys
these out.
get a nice comparison for everyone.
Cool.
All right, awesome, Jack. Well, thank you so much. It's been a
Yeah,
pleasure. I
likewise.
appreciate you, and we'll be hearing from you soon for sure.
Okay, sounds good. Have a good one, Lorenzo. Bye.
So, bye bye.